Her breath was a furnace against my skin, each exhale a molten thread weaving through the air between us. In the dim glow of her apartment, Clara's fingers traced the edge of my collarbone, a touch so deliberate it felt like a confession. My heart thundered, a traitor to the promises I'd made to myself, to Lily, to the life I was supposed to lead. The room smelled of her, jasmine and something darker, like the musk of unspoken desires. I should have left. I should have paid the rent I owed and walked away. But her eyes, sharp and hungry, held me captive, and when she leaned closer, her lips brushing the shell of my ear, I was already lost. "I can make it easier for you, Ethan," she had whispered, her voice a velvet blade. "No money, just us." The words were a spark, igniting something reckless in me. I was 25, drowning in debts and dreams, renting a cramped room in her sprawling house because it was all I could afford. Clara, 10 years older, carried herself with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she wanted. Her husband, Daniel, was a ghost in their marriage, always away on business, leaving her alone in a house too big for one heart. I'd seen the way she looked at me, the way her gaze lingered when I handed her half the rent in crumpled bills. But I never imagined it would come to this. That night, the air was thick with summer heat, the kind that made your skin feel alive, too sensitive to every touch. She stood in the doorway of my room, her silk robe slipping just enough to reveal the curve of her shoulder. I was sitting on the bed, counting the weeks I'd been late on rent, when she stepped inside, closing the door with a soft click that felt like a lock snapping shut. "You don't have to struggle," she said, her voice low, intimate, as if we were already conspirators. "Let me take care of you." I wanted to say no. I wanted to think of Lily, her soft laughter, the way she trusted me. But Clara's presence was a tide, pulling me under. She moved closer, her fingers brushing my jaw, and I felt the heat of her, the way her body seemed to hum with a rhythm I couldn't ignore. When she kissed me, it wasn't gentle. It was a collision, a claiming. Her lips were fire, her hands urgent, and I was weak. So weak, as I pulled her closer, my fingers sinking into the softness of her waist. The bed creaked beneath us, a quiet witness to our betrayal. Her skin was a map I didn't know I wanted to explore, each curve a discovery that made my pulse race. Our breaths mingled, sharp and uneven, as our bodies found a rhythm that was both foreign and instinctive. Her hands guided me, confident, unyielding, and I followed, lost in the heat of her, the way her body arched against mine, the soft gasps that escaped her lips. It wasn't just her touch, it was the way she looked at me, as if I was the only thing that mattered, as if this moment could erase every debt, every doubt. But even as I surrendered, guilt clawed at me. Lily's face flashed in my mind, her smile a knife in my chest. I thought of Daniel, the man who trusted his wife to run their home while he was gone. This was wrong, so wrong, but the thrill of it, the forbidden pulse of it, kept me tethered to Clara. When she moved against me, her breath hot against my throat, I felt alive in a way I hadn't in months. The shame was there, but so was the exhilaration, a dangerous cocktail that made me dizzy. Afterward, we lay tangled in the sheets, the silence heavy with what we'd done. Her fingers traced lazy circles on my chest, but I couldn't look at her. "This doesn't change anything," she said, her voice calm, almost clinical. "You don't owe me money anymore." But I knew it wasn't that simple. I felt the weight of her gaze, the unspoken promise of more. I should have ended it there, should have packed my bags and left. But I didn't. I stayed, caught in the web of her touch, her scent, her quiet demands. The days that followed were a blur of tension and temptation. I avoided Lily's calls, unable to face her voice without feeling the sting of my betrayal. Clara, though, was relentless. She'd brush past me in the hallway, her hand lingering on my arm, or she'd knock on my door late at night, her smile a silent invitation. Each time I told myself it would be the last. Each time, I failed. Her apartment became a sanctuary and a prison, a place where I could forget who I was supposed to be, if only for a few stolen hours. One evening she came to me again, her hair loose, her eyes gleaming with something wild. The house was quiet, Daniel away as always, and the air felt charged, like the moment before a storm. She didn't speak, just took my hand and led me to her room. The familiarity of it, the way her body fit against mine, the way her breath hitched when I touched her, made it feel almost inevitable. But this time, there was an edge to her, a hunger that felt dangerous. She pressed herself closer, her movements bolder, her whispers more reckless. "You like this, don't you?" she murmured, her lips grazing my ear. "You like how it feels to be bad." I did. God help me, I did. But the guilt was a shadow, growing darker with every touch. I thought of Lily, waiting for me to be the man she believed in. I thought of Daniel, oblivious to the betrayal under his roof. And yet, as Clara's hands roamed my skin, as her body moved with mine in a dance of heat and rhythm, I couldn't stop. The shame burned, but so did the thrill, and I was caught between them, unable to choose. The days bled into nights, each one marked by the quiet creak of Clara's door, the soft rustle of her robe as it fell to the floor. I told myself I could stop, that I could reclaim the man I used to be, but her touch was a current, pulling me deeper into a sea I didn't know how to escape. Every encounter was a theft, of time, of trust, of the life I'd promised Lily. Yet with Clara, I was someone else, someone reckless, alive in a way that felt both wrong and undeniable. Her apartment was a world apart, a place where debts were paid in whispers and skin, where the air was thick with the scent of jasmine and sin. She grew bolder, her invitations more brazen. One afternoon, I was fixing a leaky faucet in the kitchen, my attempt to earn my keep beyond our illicit bargain, when she appeared, leaning against the counter, her blouse unbuttoned just enough to draw my eye. The house was silent, the summer heat pressing against the windows, and her gaze was a challenge, daring me to cross the line again. "You're good with your hands?" she said, her voice low, teasing as she stepped closer, her fingers brushing the back of my neck. The sink dripped, a steady rhythm that matched the pulse in my throat, and before I could think, her lips were on mine, urgent, demanding. We stumbled to the living room, the couch becoming our stage, the cushions sinking beneath our weight. Her touch was fire, her breath a storm against my skin, and I was lost in the cadence of her body, the way it moved with mine, fluid and fierce. She was relentless, her hands guiding me, her whispers urging me to let go, to forget everything but this. "Don't think," she murmured, her lips grazing my jaw. "Just feel." And I did. Every curve, every shiver, every gasp that broke the silence. The world outside faded, leaving only the heat of her, the rhythm of us, a dance that was both salvation and ruin. But even in the haze of it, guilt was a splinter in my mind. I saw Lily's face in the quiet moments, her eyes trusting, her voice soft as she talked about our future. I hated myself for it, for the lies I told her when she asked why I seemed distant. "Just stressed about money," I'd say, the words sour in my mouth. Clara, though, was a drug, and each time I swore I'd quit, she'd find me, her touch reigniting the spark I couldn't douse. The shame was heavy, but the thrill was heavier, a weight that anchored me to her. One night, she came to my room, her eyes alight with something new, something reckless. She wore a dress that clung to her like a second skin, and when she closed the door, the air shifted, charged with a danger I couldn't name. "I want to try something," she said, her voice a purr as she stepped closer, her fingers trailing down my chest. There was no preamble, no hesitation. She pulled me to her, her kiss a spark that set the room ablaze. We fell to the bed, her movements bold, unyielding, as if she was claiming something she'd already won. Her hands were everywhere, her breath hot against my throat, and I followed, caught in the tide of her desire. She pushed boundaries that night, her whispers daring me to match her audacity. "No one has to know," she said, her voice a velvet blade as she moved against me, her body a symphony of heat and rhythm. The bed groaned beneath us, the walls too thin to hold our secrets, and I felt the thrill of it, the danger, the forbidden pulse that made my blood sing. But there was fear, too, a shadow that grew with every gasp, every touch. What if Daniel came home early? What if Lily sensed the truth in my silences? The questions were knives, but Clara's touch dulled their edges, pulling me back to the moment, to her. Afterward, we lay in the dark, her head on my chest, her fingers tracing patterns on my skin. The silence was heavy, broken only by the distant hum of the city outside. "You're mine now," she said, her voice soft but certain, and the words sent a chill through me. I wanted to argue, to tell her this was just a mistake, a lapse I could undo. But the truth was uglier. I was hers, in ways I couldn't admit. The debt I'd owed her was gone, but I'd traded it for something heavier, something that bound me to her in ways I hadn't foreseen. The next morning, I saw Lily, her smile bright as she handed me a coffee, oblivious to the storm inside me. We sat in a cafe, her hand warm in mine, and every word she spoke was a reminder of what I was risking. "I love you," she said, her eyes soft, and I forced a smile, the guilt a stone in my chest. I wanted to confess, to beg her forgiveness, but the thought of losing her, of seeing her hurt, kept me silent. Instead, I kissed her, hoping the act could erase the truth, knowing it couldn't. Clara didn't stop. She found me in the hallway, her touch a spark that reignited the cycle. Each time I told myself it was the last, but her pull was too strong, her presence a flame I couldn't resist. The encounters grew more frequent, more reckless. Her car in the garage, the laundry room at midnight, places where the risk was as intoxicating as her touch. I was drowning, caught between the man I wanted to be and the one I'd become, and with every step deeper into her world, the way out seemed further away. The air in Clara's house had become a living thing, thick with secrets that pressed against my skin. Each creak of the floorboards, each flicker of light through the windows, felt like an accusation, a reminder that I was trespassing on a life that wasn't mine. Yet her pull was relentless, a tide I couldn't swim against. She was no longer content with stolen moments in the safety of her apartment. Her desires spilled into riskier corners, each encounter a dare to fate. I was unraveling, torn between the man who loved Lily and the one who burned under Clara's touch. And the weight of it was crushing me. One evening she found me in the garage, where I was sorting through boxes to avoid her gaze. The air was heavy with the scent of oil and dust, and she appeared like a shadow, her silhouette framed by the dim light. "You've been distant," she said, her voice low, almost wounded, as she stepped closer, her fingers brushing my arm. There was no preamble, no hesitation. She pressed herself against me, her lips a spark that ignited the familiar fire. The cold metal of the car pressed into my back as her hands roamed, her breath hot against my throat, and I was powerless, caught in the rhythm of her body, the urgency of her need. It was reckless, dangerously so. Daniel was due back any day, and the garage door was half open, the street just beyond a thin veil of dusk. But Clara thrived on the edge, her movements bold, her whispers daring me to match her. "No one will see," she murmured, her lips grazing my ear, her body moving with a cadence that drowned out my fear. The world narrowed to the heat of her, the soft gasps that broke the silence, the way her skin seemed to pulse under my hands. It was wrong, so wrong, but the thrill of it, the danger, the forbidden pulse, made my blood sing, even as guilt clawed at my chest. Afterward, she leaned against the car, her hair mussed, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "You're getting better at this," she said, a smile curling her lips. But I couldn't meet her gaze. The shame was a tide, rising with every breath, and I thought of Lily, waiting for me, trusting me. I thought of Daniel, a man I barely knew but had betrayed in the worst way. "This has to stop," I said, my voice rough, but Clara only laughed, soft and knowing. "You don't mean that," she said, stepping closer, her fingers brushing my jaw. "You love this too much." She was right, and I hated her for it. I hated myself more. The encounters grew more brazen, her hand slipping under the table during a rare dinner with Daniel, her foot nudging mine under the guise of casual conversation. He was oblivious, his attention on his phone, his marriage a hollow shell that Clara filled with me. Each time I swore I'd end it, but her touch was a drug, and I was an addict, chasing the high even as it destroyed me. Lily began to notice. "You're not yourself," she said one night, her voice soft but searching as we lay in her bed, the city humming outside. Her fingers traced my arm, a gesture so gentle it broke something in me. I wanted to confess, to spill the truth and beg her to save me, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I kissed her, hard, hoping the act could erase Clara's mark, knowing it couldn't. Lily's love was a lifeline, but I was too far gone, tangled in a web I'd helped weave. Clara's recklessness grew, her demands more audacious. One night, she slipped into my room while Daniel slept down the hall, her presence a spark in the dark. "He won't hear?" she whispered, her hands already moving, her body pressing against mine. The risk was insane, the walls too thin, but her touch was a current, pulling me under. Our movements were hushed, urgent, a dance of shadows and heat. Her breath was a storm against my skin, her fingers guiding me, and I followed, lost in the rhythm of her, the way her body arched, the soft moans she stifled against my shoulder. The danger was intoxicating, a pulse that matched the one in my veins. But fear was a shadow, growing with every sound. When it was over, she lay beside me, her head on my chest, her fingers tracing lazy circles. "You're mine," she said again, her voice a quiet claim, and the words were a chain binding me to her. I wanted to argue, to tell her I belonged to Lily, to myself, but the truth was uglier. I was hers, in ways I couldn't escape. The guilt was a stone, heavy and unyielding, but so was the thrill, and I was caught between them, unable to choose. The next day, Lily called, her voice trembling. "We need to talk," she said, and my heart sank, the world tilting beneath me. I met her at the park, her eyes searching mine, and I knew she sensed something, even if she didn't know what. "You're slipping away," she said, her voice breaking. And I wanted to hold her, to promise her everything, but Clara's scent lingered on my skin, a ghost I couldn't shake. I lied, told her I was stressed, but her gaze was sharp, cutting through my defenses. "I love you," she said, and the words were a knife, twisting in my chest. That night, Clara came to me again, her touch a spark that reignited the cycle. But this time there was a knock at the door, sharp and sudden, and my blood turned to ice. "Ethan?" Daniel's voice, low and confused, cut through the dark. Clara froze, her eyes wide, and for a moment the world held its breath. The knock echoed in my skull, a hammer striking the fragile walls of our secret. Clara's eyes locked with mine, wide with a mix of fear and defiance, her breath still uneven from the heat of moments before. "Ethan?" Daniel's voice came again, sharper now, tinged with suspicion. My heart was a wild thing, clawing at my ribs, and I scrambled for control, for any shred of composure. Clara slid off the bed, silent as a shadow, her fingers brushing my arm as if to steady me. Or herself. "Answer him," she whispered, her voice low, urgent, but her calmness unnerved me, a stark contrast to the chaos in my chest. I pulled on a shirt, my hands trembling, and opened the door just enough to face him. Daniel stood in the hallway, his face half lit by the dim glow of a lamp, his eyes narrowing as they flicked past me into the room. "Everything okay?" he asked, his tone clipped, and I nodded too quickly, my voice hoarse. "Yeah, just couldn't sleep." The lie tasted bitter, but he didn't press, only gave a curt nod before turning away. I closed the door, my pulse still racing, and turned to find Clara already slipping out through the window, her silhouette a fleeting ghost against the night. That close call should have been the end. It should have shaken me awake, forced me to sever the thread binding me to her. But Clara was aflame, and I was moth's wings, drawn even as I burned. The next day, she found me in the laundry room, her touch a spark that reignited the cycle. "We're not done," she murmured, her lips grazing my jaw, and I hated how easily I surrendered, how her hands could unravel every vow I'd made to myself. The hum of the washing machine masked our breaths, our movements a hurried dance of heat and risk, her body pressing against mine with a rhythm that drowned out the world. The thrill was sharper now, laced with the memory of Daniel's voice, the knife edge of almost being caught, but the guilt was a tide, rising higher with every stolen moment. Lily's words from the park haunted me, her trembling voice a mirror to the cracks in my soul. I began to see her less, dodging her calls with excuses that grew thinner each time. When we did meet, her touch felt like a judgment, her love a weight I didn't deserve. "What's wrong with you?" she asked one evening, her eyes searching mine, and I wanted to confess, to lay bare the ugliness of what I'd done. But the thought of her pain, of her leaving me, kept the truth locked inside, festering like a wound. Clara sensed my withdrawal, and it only made her bolder. She'd slip notes under my door, her handwriting sharp and teasing. "Meet me tonight. You know where." Each one was a summons, and I obeyed, hating myself for it. One night, she led me to the attic, a place of dust and forgotten things, where the air was thick with the scent of old wood and her perfume. The floorboards creaked beneath us as she pulled me close, her kiss a claim, her body a storm that swept away my resolve. Our movements were slow this time, deliberate, as if savouring the edge we walked. Her breath was hot against my throat, her hands guiding me, and I was lost in the cadence of her, the way her skin seemed to hum under my touch. But even as I gave in, I felt the fracture widening. The man I was becoming was a stranger, a traitor to everyone I loved. The end came not with a scream, but a whisper. Lily showed up unannounced one afternoon, her knock soft but insistent. I was in the kitchen, Clara's laughter still ringing in my ears from an encounter hours before, when Lily's voice called my name. My heart sank as I opened the door, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed. "I know," she said, her voice breaking, and the world tilted beneath me. She held up her phone, a photo someone had sent. An anonymous shadow who'd seen Clara and me in the garage, our silhouettes too close, too intimate. "How could you?" she asked, tears spilling, and I had no answer, no defense. The truth was a blade, cutting through the lies I'd built. She left without another word, her footsteps fading down the path, and I stood frozen, the weight of her pain crushing me. When I turned, Clara was there, watching from the hallway, her expression unreadable. "She'll get over it," she said, her voice cool, but I saw the flicker of unease in her eyes. For the first time, I saw her not as a flame, but as a void, a hunger that consumed without giving back. "We're done," I said. The words rough, final, and her smile faltered. But she didn't argue. Daniel came home that night, his face weary from travel, and I braced for the storm. But it never came. Clara was a master of masks, her laughter light as she greeted him, her touch on his arm a performance of loyalty. I moved out the next day, my belongings packed in haste, the house a memory I wanted to erase. I found a cheap motel, the kind where no one asks questions, and spent nights staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every choice that led me here. Lily wouldn't answer my calls, her silence a verdict I couldn't appeal. I saw her once, weeks later, at a cafe with a friend, her laughter a sound I no longer had a right to. Clara, I heard, stayed with Daniel, their marriage a hollow shell that somehow endured. I was alone, the thrill of those stolen nights replaced by a hollowness that echoed with every step. The man I'd been was gone, lost in the heat of Clara's touch, and what remained was a shadow, haunted by the choices I couldn't undo.